running a bit late, is it?
No, we're actually running slightly ahead of time, I think. So we were, yeah. So appreciate you joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time. I've given a glowing introduction to Invest India already. Yeah, so from our perspective, we have heard from 4 speakers today. So we heard about the India manufacturing story, and we've heard about the opportunity that stands before it, as well as the challenges. And we focused on that segment and government aims of 1 trillion manufacturing GVA, as well as the 5 trillion goal for GDP. And we've also heard from a company called AIA Engineering in terms of its place in the manufacturing segment. So it'd be great as the final speaker that if you could bring that all together and tell us your thought process in terms of how manufacturing will grow in India and how it will increasingly contribute, and what you're seeing from foreign firms in terms of their interest in manufacturing in India, as well as joint ventures with Indian businesses.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I know you all have had a long morning, so I won't be too long. I'll be brief in my comments. But what I thought is I'll just share with you a few pointers of what I'm seeing happening in my office every day. And maybe then you can put the pieces together and take a call yourselves. And just to put that in perspective, Invest India is the National Investment Promotion and Facilitation Agency. I've got 4 verticals. The first vertical is responsible for investment promotion and facilitation. And in that, it sort of works with both global and local investors, helping them, show them the opportunity, getting them all approvals, getting them the land partner, and then hand-holding them right through the process. A part of this is that, you know, the FDI policy or the industrial policy, all those policies, the straw man gets created here within the team, and also about creating the ecosystem and how we can get it going across all the state governments. That also happens here. So it's probably the only platform in the country where all the state governments and the central government together are stakeholders in it. So that's the first element. The second element, you would have all heard about Startup India. We are the execution arm of Startup India, which was launched by the Honorable Prime Minister in January 2016. The third element is the Prime Minister's Science and Technology Initiative. This is very interesting. In fact, just before joining you, I've just signed off. We are having a roundtable with all the state governments on how to promote R&D in the country. And there is some amazing stuff happening at the state government level. Some even I didn't know, you know, I was just hearing from the state governments. And one of the objectives we do there is to tie up the dots and see how we get the ecosystem going more. And I'll touch upon that a bit. But in that, what we do is, one of the programs we run there is called Agni, the Accelerated Growth of New India Innovation. We are taking innovations which are happening in those 600 odd innovation centers across the country, fast tracking them onto commercialization, and actually building the ecosystem to make that happen more. In fact, late last week, we launched the Waste to Wealth initiative, where we are picking up sentinel sites across the country, and we're going to be putting, you know, best-in-class projects with global collaboration, and also to create solutions for the world at large. And the last is the Prime Minister's Project Management Group. These are large-level projects with the Prime Minister monitors himself, and we are the execution arm again for that. So that is what, quickly, as a quick introduction on Invest India. And just to put it in perspective, we are a startup of the government in the sense we actually just started 2015-16. And just if I may just put a little byline for all of you. And it also goes to show how the India story is leapfrogging. In a period of 3 years, 4 years, Invest India has been ranked by UNCTAD as the world's #1 investment promotion agency. Now coming back to where we were. Let me start with just before this little virus hit us. And let me take you back to March of this year. And you know, we are about 156 or 157th day today of the most unprecedented lockdown ever in human history. Even across the globe, if you look at it, the lockdown of 1.3 billion people is sort of with all kinds of challenges. And please don't forget, this was a time when we also saw floods, earthquakes, anything which you could think of. It all is happening during these 156 days, and yet India is there standing itself. And one of the good things of that was that the early lockdown, which was announced, and a very clear direction given by the Prime Minister, that we are going to save lives, and that is the core part of the entire strategy, has sort of helped us to be able to contain this virus across. And I'll share some numbers. But let me just start as to where we were before this virus hit us. And let me take you to 30th of March. That is the financial year closing of India. 30th of March this year. We closed this year with $74 billion in FDI. It is the highest ever FDI we've received in our history. You know, we all got independent in 1947. I may be an ancient civilization, but I'm one of the youngest democracies on the planet. Now, $74 billion, let me give you some interesting thoughts on that one. 93% of that came in what we call as the open route, which meant it did not require any specific clearances. India today is one of the most open economies on the planet, and the private sector can play a role in each and every sector of my economy. The second interesting fact to that, about close to a little over 40% of this 74 billion is in greenfield investment. So today I'm ranked in the top 10 greenfield investment destinations of the world. And what that gives the comfort is that the global investor today can take a long-term call on India. They are more comfortable doing that. And why is that happening? So let us see what were the three imperatives. And this is all what the investors tell me, which I'm sharing with you, is that clearly India was the largest consumer base. I mean, we'll be 1.3 billion by 2025-26. I don't think, at least for the next 100 years, will you have any other single national geographic boundary or a national boundary where you'll have 1.5 billion customers. So makes it the largest. We're also the youngest. Average age is 29. We will remain the youngest all the way up to 2080. A billion of that 1.5 billion under the age of 35. So even my dependency ratio is going to be very less. I'll have more people in the workforce. In fact, I'll be adding another 800 million people. I'll have a workforce of close to 900 million people during the next couple of years. Now comes the last element which was there, which had got the sudden growth of FDI into India. And that last element was that we had positioned ourselves as the fastest growing large economy on the planet. Think about it. In the past 55 months, India has had the ability to race ahead of Russia, Italy, Brazil, France, and the UK in the size of GDP. We are about 3 trillion. We are looking to equal Germany in the next 12 to 18 months. And I'm not even talking in PPP terms, because in that I'm already number 3 on the planet. Now what has happened? And let us see how this virus, because it has changed everyone's life, yours and mine, and what is it which is coming out of it. One is, to my mind, what the virus has done is it has amplified and accelerated existing trends, existing underlying trends. And it has amplified them. Think about it. We all remember de-risking was the first part of our global lessons whenever we wanted to look at business. And over the past 2 decades, we saw a large part of that getting sort of ignored, and supply chains getting concentrated in certain geographies based on cost efficiencies, purely cost efficiencies. That has hit everyone to the core. What I am seeing and what I've seen in the past, especially 120 days, a very significant increase in the number of business requests which have been coming into me. Let me tell you, in the past 60 months, I've had about business requests of about 250,000. So that's 250,000 business requests, what I've done from across 119 countries, across 47 sectors. But that number has increased exponentially in the past, especially 100 odd days. And the queries no longer are show us the opportunity, it is please show us the land, we want to come in there. And these are not just the big boys coming in, these are even their small supply chains moving in. And a lot of questions are, show us where the clusters are, where we can come and do a plug and play model. In fact, I will be doing a 3x of my own team in the course of the next 120 days because of this number of queries and requests which have started coming in. What is happening there? I'm seeing each of these companies is wanting to onshore their supply chains. 2 elements. One is to bring it closer to the market where India was. And the second element out of that was that they are looking to shorten the supply chains. You see, the supply chains have got much longer during the past few days. past few years. They're wanting to shorten it. And what I've seen, virtually all investments coming into India, and that 74 billion which I talk of, everyone I've spoken with, it is about using the scale which they get in India to get the efficiencies to create an export product for themselves. Look at Mercedes, for example. Mercedes came into India, created a truck which is 90% local, design, everything, the powertrain, the chassis, and now it's being exported to 50 countries across the globe. Everybody is wanting to do that. What has happened now? I showed you the three pillars. We're the largest economy, fastest growing, largest consumer base, fastest growing, youngest. Now the fourth pillar got added to it. That fourth pillar was making it easier for an investor to come into India. What has happened in the past 100 days, and that is, again, it takes it back to this government. You know, that old adage of why let an opportunity like this go to waste. The state governments and the central governments have come up with unprecedented reforms, touching all four elements of production, be it land, labor, be it on the capital side, be it on making ease of doing business. For example, I've had even the central government, just forget about the state governments also. There's going to be a central place where you will just need to come to one office or come to one portal to apply for all your licenses. Some state governments are actually giving it within a deemed period of time. They've said that if within 30 days you don't hear from us, all your approvals are deemed given. And if you don't get it in 30 days, that state government is penalizing that government official's personal account for every day's delay. You know, I also sit on the board of the World Investment Promotion Agencies and others. Nowhere else in the world do they have something like this. It has now been acknowledged as a global gold standard on how the government is doing. The second element. So one is making those procedures easier, making those approvals easier, and basically reducing the number of approvals which are required to make it one of the easiest in the world. The second, what is happening very fast, is I have over 3,400 industry clusters across my country. Each of the state governments and the central government, we are upgrading those. We are making these plug and play models much easier for anybody to come in and just start their businesses quickly. That is where I'm seeing this huge developmental effort which is coming in. I'll give you one instance. And the other thing which we are going sector by sector. So, you know, we have about 25 sectors, and I know you've spoken about manufacturing all morning, so let me just touch upon that. So in 2014, when this Prime Minister had come, we did a global stakeholder meet, and we had global investors point out to us where they saw were the strengths in India's manufacturing abilities. And about 26 sectors had been identified on where we could add significant value on the global supply chain. Why did this exercise take place? You see, 16 to 17% of my GDP was coming from manufacturing, and rightfully so, this government felt we have to take it up to 25%. What had happened with us, if you look at it, the success of my IT revolution in the late 1900s and the earlier part of the century sort of took that as the mainstay of the government of India in its growth potential. And to a large extent, if I may say, manufacturing, which was actually the core strength of India, got a bit neglected. So what this government has done has brought that back into the mainstream. And that is where you will see a large level of activity happening here. You see, the strength of India actually lies in my 65 million MSMEs. And I think a lot of us and a lot of you who are amazing analysts sitting across the globe did not actually see that focus on it, or did not actually see that that is the place where the focus had to be. And the government has now focused on that engine of growth. What was the strength of this MSME? Let me give you a quick instance. 30th March, when I went into this virus, I did not have a single PPE in India. We were scurrying around across the globe, trying to import PPEs, trying to get ventilators for ourselves. And you know, virtually the entire globe was closed. There were just 2 or 3 or 5 countries, and we were all running around there to get those orders. And those were very difficult to get, because what was happening, they were running short of supplies themselves. And you had all kinds of requirements, which was, let's say, upfront payment without being able to test, etc., which were not taken into the best commercial sense. So 30th March, I had 0. 15th July, I have a run rate of close to 1 million PPEs a day. And not just for my own country, I'm exporting them, which includes ventilators too, to countries like the UK, to the US. These PPEs have now started getting exported. What happened? And my team was very instrumental in working on this. We were working with startups. We were getting them tied up with the larger corporates so that we could use that frugal innovation power and strength of India. The strength of India's MSMEs, where could they pivot their business models very quickly, and the best utilization of capital. We joined their hands, and this is where they showed the results of that frugal innovation. So what is going to happen as we move out of this in my last set of remarks for you before you want to ask any Q&As? I believe that as we move out of this COVID, one, I think we will be into a sharp U. I don't think it's a V. It's going to be a sharper U when we come out of it. The reason why I say it, let me give you statistics. I know when you look at news channels, you might get a feeling that India is totally submerged by the virus. But you know, India is divided into 729 administrative districts geographically. Of those 729, only 11 have over 5,000 cases. Only 88 have over 1,000 cases. So only 88 of those 729 have over 1,000 cases. In fact, about close to 200 of those 729 have less than 50 cases. 23 of them have a 0 case. Now, I do not know how this virus will change by itself tomorrow. You know how it keeps changing by the day. But what is happening on that count is that we've been able to contain it to a large extent. In fact, if you look at it, I have 28 states in India and 8 special territories. About 80% of this virus has been confined to 6 of those 28 states. And that is because of the government's stated objective, let's do an early lockdown. Let me give you some statistics which I got for June, July. You know, during this time, there was a financial moratorium. So especially MSMEs and my microfinance entities did not have to pay back. But even during a moratorium, the collections from my MSMEs in June was 65%. The collections from my microfinance, they started June with 60%, they ended June with 80%, 80. That is in a moratorium. My FMCG is back to pre-COVID levels. My cement demand is up, my toll freight is up, my rail freight is up, very close to pre-COVID levels. And most interestingly, my two-wheelers, my agricultural equipment demand, the tractors demand is back to pre-COVID levels. In fact, I'm seeing on a significant month, it has been one of the highest in July, the demand, which you could say was a bit of a pent-up demand. So what we are looking at is moving out pretty fast out of this virus and its impact, and being able to take back our position of being the fastest growing large economy on the planet. I'm very confident you will see those numbers coming out in the next 24, 36 months. And even by that aspect, even if you look at independent studies done by the IMF, etc., they will show you that every economy has been hit, but we still, so have we been hit, but we still stand a good chance of moving out of it on a fast track. Now that is a question of, do we do it in 12 months or do it in 24 months? I think the question is there, anywhere between 12 to 24 months when we get out of it. When we get out of it, what you will see now is the next stage of India's growth being propelled by its MSMEs. That basically means that the growth of India is now going to be bottom up. It's not going to be just confined to those 10 or 11 main urban centers or around them. It is not going to be confined to those 5 or 7 sectors. It is going to be far more broad-based across all sectors and across especially those 26 sectors. Infrastructure is going to be very big: chemicals, electronics, steel, capital goods, power, renewables, coal and mining, and infrastructure I've already mentioned is going to be one of the biggest. You know, we just had the former US ambassador in his farewell speech in India just 3 years ago, had a very interesting statement that 70% of India of 2030 is yet to be constructed. It's a fact. And how do I say that also in another, if I put it in number terms, I'm looking at a 3 trillion today as my economy size. I'm looking that number at 5 trillion by 25, 26, maybe 12 months plus minus because of this virus. I'm definitely looking by 2030, 2035, anywhere between 8 to 10 trillion dollars. That means I'm looking to add those about $7 trillion to the balance sheets of all those which are going to join me. And that is where what we are doing, the focus of the government today is no longer just on viability for each of these entities coming in. It is now moved to profitability. In fact, if you look at it, my tax rate has been brought down to 15% for new investments. So it's not just the market. We are trying to see every day the focus is all our policies are being done by stakeholder consultation. We just announced a policy for pharmaceuticals, which you will see the incentives have, and these were all given to us by the stakeholders globally to create India as a global hub for that. We had already announced one for electronics, and that one was hugely successful, again by stakeholder. 31st July was the last date for each of these global companies to apply for, to be able to be a part of that incentive package. And let me tell you, each and every global major in the world is a part, has applied to it, and is now setting up their offices and setting up their manufacturing entities in India. I'm showing them land. Now we're going to be doing the same across virtually all sectors, which we are going into. You want to have a look at what those sectors are, 25, 26, I would urge you, go onto our website. It's called investindia.gov.in. There are 4 elements to it. That website is updated daily, so you will get a lot of information. The second part to that, you will see the Startup India website. And I will end by that startup point just after I've told you about the startup website. You'll get through it on my website. Agni, AGNII, Accelerated Growth of New India Innovation. And the last one there, which will really interest you, is the India Investment Grid. What we are doing here, these are investable projects which are ready in India, which you can see yourself, what stage they are in, what is happening, which sector they are in. And this portal gives you all information on what is happening. It may not be the most comprehensive. I have about 10,000 odd projects on it, or 5,000 projects on it. I have globally 10,000 investors which are looking at it every day. This is being updated. We've just added another 7,000 projects from the National Infrastructure Pipeline. It'll give you a good idea what is happening with that. But let me end with a story to tell you, when I tell you that India now is moving bottom up. And the strength of India's manufacturing is what is going to drive this country during the course of the next decade towards that 10 trillion figure, which I was talking to you about, which is coming from my MSMEs. 2 weeks ago, I was on one of these panels and I was sharing it with an 18-year-old boy from a small place in an eastern state called Bihar in India. The place is Sitamhari. If you go into it, you will realize it's one of the more backward areas of India. This is an 18-year-old boy from there. His name was Rohit Kashyap. You know what Rohit Kashyap does? He started a startup called Maitri. What does Maitri do? It helps all youngsters in his area who have their own startups to get them mentors across the globe and to get them consultants and to get them a market across the globe. This is from a small area in India called Sitamhari in Bihar. This is the story of New India. And what is driving that story is the amazing level of digitization which has happened. To my personal mind, we are at one of the most exciting inflection points in our history. And I'm not just talking of modern Indian history, I'm talking of history for the past 1,000 years. And that inflection point, which is the bottom end of the hockey stick moving up, is being driven by the amazing level of digitization, which for the first time, to my mind, has brought India one economically. A person sitting in a far-off village, my Rohit Kashyap, has the same access to opportunity, has the same access to all government schemes and incentives, which I have or my son has sitting in a metro. For the first time, you have each one of them being able to contribute on a democratic, equal manner to the growth of this nation and to work together towards it. And let me give you a number on how this digitization is helping. Today, I have 1 billion people with a mobile, I have 1 billion people with a bank account attached to a bank account, and I have 1 billion people with a unique identity number. I have the largest opportunity. As far as a market is concerned, I have the fastest growing opportunity. I'm creating an environment for them where their journey is simpler for a company to come in. Let me tell you the fourth thing which has happened with this digitization. I made it easier for each of these companies to access that market. For the first time in human economic history, a brand new company got 100 million new customers in 180 days at a cost per acquisition of 1/5 of the global average. A brand new global company comes into India, gets 36 million new customers in 30 months, again at a cost of acquisition per client at half of the world's average. And this is how India is leapfrogging. You all agree with me? Data is the new oil. Let me ask you a question. And let me not even ask for total data. Let me take you to per capita data usage. My ranking globally, just about 36 months ago, my global ranking on per capita data usage was 122. And I'm saying per capita. I'm not even going to do a total one by multiplying it by 1.3. That'll be unfair. My per capita mobile data usage just about 30 months ago was 122 global average, global ranking. Today, actually earlier this year, I was number 1 in the world. India utilized more per capita data usage than China and the US put together. That is how fast this country is leapfrogging, and it is changing. And I've given you some elements of why it is changing at that pace. And I close with my last element. Change is very important, but equally important is a society's ability to adopt and adapt to that change. And by all social parameters, a society's mobility is one of the biggest parameters or determinants of its ability to adapt and adopt to change. I told you I have a human capital of 1.3 billion. Do you want to take a guess how many people traveled on my railways last year? You can do a multiplication. You would say 1.3 billion. It could be 800 million. It could be 1.3 billion. You know how many people traveled on my local and all country railways last year? 8 billion people. I have one of the highest migrant labor in the world. That helps it for its ability to create change and accept change. So please remember, you are today watching in India, which is at an inflection point. When you analyze it, do not get caught by the past. There are some of those numbers you will go by, but it's going to be a completely new future and a completely new India with totally different determinants of its growth as we move out and as we are already at that point. Thank you. I leave it open for questions.
Thanks very much. In terms of that session, that was very inspiring in terms of India and its, I suppose, its change compared to where it's been and where it's going. One of the questions that has come through is, you know, I think in India, there's always been projects and new projects announced. Sometimes the implementation of those projects has led to delays and frustration and perhaps a higher cost of capital. How do you think that that can be resolved and going forward, implementation happens at a better rate?
That is very critical what you've done, what you asked me. And frankly, that is one of the core points of the government. Remember, I told you last of my 4 pillars were the PMG, the Project Management Group. And this is where the Prime Minister himself monitors the execution of these large projects. And I remember when I came into this job 5 years ago, there were huge delays on that one. There were projects which were no longer viable because of the huge delays which had happened. That is what this government has set right. And I'll tell you what has happened on that. One is all these approvals now moving into a single window. Remember, I told you some state governments giving you all those approvals within 30 days, even if you don't hear from them, etc., etc. That is moving at a very fast, rapid rate across my state governments. And I'm doing that now even at the central level. Actually, we're going to be launching a portal and you'll get it all on the portal. That is the first element where these delays were happening. And in fact, what has happened, and I'll give you an example because I don't mind sharing that name also. Vestas, the world's largest wind power company, From the day their board gave them approval to the day the first manufactured blade came out of their factory, they are, I think, doing this in about 12 or 13 countries. The best example they had experience was in my neighboring country, where they did it in about 18 months and a few days. You know, in India, we did it in 14 months and 23 days. So there are a lot of these stories of the past of that inflection point, where you will see that the delays had happened, but now you're seeing these stories of new India coming up, where it's happening at a very fast track. They have the ability to be able to do it. And the other thing which I mentioned to you, what we are doing is upgrading those industrial clusters so it's a quick plug and play. And in fact, today, if you're starting an MSME, you do not require any approvals for the first 36 months. You can just come and start. Some of the state governments have done that. So what we are doing is we are shortening that cycle of execution to make your ROIs better and to get your IRRs on a much positive level. So the best utilization of capital, that's when I told you we are no longer just looking at viability, which is what the earlier governments were looking at. Today it is about making it easier for the investor, making his journey the easiest in the world, and seeing how do we make you the most profitable.
I just have two more questions. So the next question is, going on that topic that you just spoke about, in the past, I suppose, again, India has been viewed as somewhat bureaucratic and taking time on getting to decisions. Is there a level of accountability that government officials will now be held to when it comes to these projects?
So what has happened, that to my mind has been the biggest change with this Prime Minister coming in. He's changed the mindset. And first it was in his first term, if you saw, it was more in the central government, and now it has seeped down to the state levels, to a large number of these state governments. So what has happened is, and that's where I must also say technology has helped us immensely. Every element of the government is outcome-based today, and there's a dashboard. And that dashboard is monitored at the highest levels. And any slippages on those dashboards are impacting the individual performances and, even promotions of a large number of these government officials. In fact, if you look at it, you're having a lot of laterals and specialists being brought into the government at senior roles. And that is what is challenging the system to do it on a fast pace. And the third thing which he said is he does not want anybody to be leached. I mean, it has to be a government which is faceless. You want those approvals, you apply for them online, you get them all online. That is already happening on the tax system. You know one thing, one of the most trickiest situations in India was booking a railway ticket, the physical booking of railway ticket, and there was a lot of rent seeking which was happening on that. Overnight, the moment we digitized it, the moment it was done on a portal, it all disappeared. Overnight, within 12 hours. The moment that portal went live, it was done with. They did not need to go to meet anybody. It was all being done. And that is how this Prime Minister and this government wants approvals for everyone. And that is what takes me to that point. Let me just leave a quick one on that for you. In the World Bank's ease of doing rankings, we moved from the 140s to the 60s in a period of just 36 months. Even the World Bank said it's the most unprecedented jump ever they've experienced. But let me tell you what went behind it. The state governments and the central government have done over 13,000 interventions, 13,000, to move it from the 140s to the 60s. Just imagine how complex we were. That is what he's simplifying completely and demystifying it. And the real results of all that change, you will now start seeing in the next 24 months. He's given us the target that we have to be in the top 25. So in such a large country, see how fast this change is happening. I've told you, the word for India is leapfrog. I gave you the instances on how the rapid change at which it is happening. And that is happening in the government at a much faster pace than even that in the private sector.
Very interesting. Just one more question for you, which has come through is, given the huge balance sheets of, foreign countries, in the past, perhaps India's bargaining power when dealing with businesses and other countries globally might have not been as significant as what it could be going forward. How do you think this is going to change? Or do you think in India, competitors are always going to have to sort of have lower margins when it comes to this dealing?
Rephrase that question for me. I didn't get it.
Yeah,
right.
sorry, it's a bit complicated, but essentially what I'm saying is in your dealings with businesses and governments overseas, the relationship, how is that changing in terms of the discussion that is occurring between the parties? Like, how is that changing? How is India having a greater role or at the table in terms of, demanding a better conditions or terms or engagement?
So what has typically happened? I think India is now on the global high table where everybody is acknowledged that it is a market they want to be with. They have to be with. I'm no longer boardroom discussions that should they be looking at India. It is when and how are they going to be coming into India. I've seen that shift happening significantly. That also means that it is on the global high table of every other element, be it on the political side of it, be it on the geopolitical side of it. And everybody acknowledges the economic strength which is going to be driving the new India forward. And that is where you see it being brought into a number of global committees at the senior most levels, at leadership levels, or at participation levels. So that has started happening very actively. Now, what is happening where companies are concerned? See, the big change in India, which has happened, I would say, again, in the past few years, is good economics is now center of good politics. So a lot of these discussions, even internally and as well as externally, be it with corporates or be it with governments, are focusing around, because every other government also is focusing around to a large extent on economics. So there's a lot of economic discussions which is happening around where partnerships with India are concerned going forward. And the other sense which I get is that because it is an open democratic country with a large level of transparency, and that age-old idiom of bureaucracy being a big hindrance, now one seeing being unshackled, and it's now that part of its challenges being taken care of on a fast-track basis, you see more and more countries are far more comfortable. More and more companies are far more comfortable in being with India. All the challenges, no challenge is hidden. It's all what you see. And we were earlier in Davos this year, and there was a roundtable of foreign institutional investors. There were 18 of them, and we had some of the top PE and the VC firms there. And one of them during the roundtable had said that when they were looking at India, they're doing a 2x of their exposure in the next 24 months. This was in this January. And another participant asked him that, why are you wanting to do that? There was a very interesting line. He said, every tomorrow of India is better than today. And he said, there are not too many other countries. He said, and that took me back. That is where my analogy of the hockey stick had come in, actually. It was during those discussions when somebody else brought it. He said, yes, they believe India was at that bottom around, turning around that hockey stick. And that vertical path was now just going to be taken off. They also called it that inflection point. So these discussions today are far more comfortable. The other element is that India today, the discussions are more on an equal level. It's not just, if I had these discussions, I get some of these facts which had been made 25, 30 years ago, they may have been in a different, unequal manner if possible. Today, we see that happening on an equal level. You're seeing the results of that. And that is where you're seeing the level of comfort, the judiciary, the openness, the democracy, the way the people in India are working, and the way the people in India support businesses, that is all coming to fore. I don't know if I've answered your question, but that's what I understood of it. If it is not, please let me know, and I'm more than happy to take it on.
No, that's exactly right. And I appreciate your response. So I think, given the time constraints and, where we're at, we'll end the session there. Thank you greatly, because that's been very insightful in terms of appreciation of the work that's been done and where India stands, and its ranking from, ease of doing business to removing bureaucracy and improving the channels by which decisions can be made, particularly in the world of digitization, which is enhancing everything. So I think we are grateful that that was the closing note for the conference. We really appreciate your time and look forward to perhaps having you speak to our audience more in the future.
Thank you. A pleasure. And if there are any queries or help, please send them to me. I'm on the website. I'll be picking them up myself the moment you send them. They get directed to my personal account. More than happy to take them on. Thank you again.
Thanks very much. Thanks a lot.